Caution number 3, Austin Hill.
Yep. Just wait. Van Guggenheimer, or however you say his fucking last name.
Yeah, it was just payback for California.
Shane Van Gisbergen just wrecked Austin Hill on lap 47 at Chicagoland. Drove into the back of him, sent him spinning into the outside wall, destroyed his race car, and then stood on pit road afterward and said with a straight face that it was a complete accident. Richard Childress, NASCAR Hall of Famer, one of the most respected team owners in the history of this sport, went straight to the radio and called it blatant. The telemetry data backed him up. And Austin Hill, he looked at the reporters after climbing out of the infield care center and said simply, "I'm sure you'll have seen the replay. If I have to explain it, people probably need to get glasses." This is not a new rivalry. This is not something that started Sunday at Chicagoland. This goes back 2 years. 2 series and now 3 separate incidents in the span of 4 races. And it is only going to get worse. Let's go all the way back to 2024 to understand exactly how deep this runs. Shane Van Gisbergen was in his first full season in American racing, running in what was then the NASCAR Xfinity Series, now known as the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. He and Austin Hill were running full-time in that same series, and they clashed at Circuit of the Americas. Then they got together again at SOMA. Van Gisbergen beat Hill to the win at SOMA that day and celebrated with one of the most iconic burnouts in recent NASCAR memory, doing donuts right next to Hill's car as Hill sat there watching. It was the kind of moment that does not get forgotten. It was the kind of moment that gets filed away and brought out again at exactly the right time. Fast forward to 2026. Van Gisbergen is now in the Cup Series full-time with Trackhouse Racing. Hill is in the Cup Series full-time with Richard Childress Racing, and they cannot stay away from each other at Pocono Raceway on June 14th. Hill was running 3 wide when he moved up the track and triggered a wreck that collected Van Gisbergen. SVG was furious. He did not name Hill publicly right away, but everyone in the garage knew exactly who he was talking about. Then came San Diego Naval Base Coronado, June 21st. And this is where everything escalated beyond a simple racing incident. Hill was at the front of the field on a restart, battling Connor Zilisch for the lead. Entering turn 1, he overdrove the corner, his rear brakes locked up. His car slid down the track and directly into Zilisch, triggering a multi-car crash that wiped out both Trackhouse racing cars. Zilisch and Van Gisbergen both gone within the first 30 laps. Hill admitted it immediately on his team radio. He knew he had made a mistake, but knowing you caused the crash and having Shane Van Gisbergen forgive you for it are 2 very different things. Van Gisbergen made that crystal clear in the days after San Diego. In a post-race recap video on his own channel, he said, 2 weeks in a row taken out by the same spud. Unfortunately, got taken out, so that sucked. Pretty gutted. Everyone is. Both of us, Connor and myself, ended up wrecked. It happens. He called Austin Hill a spud out loud. On camera posted it for everyone to see. That is not a driver who has moved on. That is a driver who is keeping score. And then Sunday happened at Chicagoland. Lap 47 of 267. Van Gisbergen is running behind Hill entering turn 3. And instead of lifting where he had lifted on every single lap prior, he goes deep. The SMT telemetry data, the tracking system that measures braking and throttle inputs from every car on track, showed it clearly. Jamie McMurray broke it down on the TNT broadcast after the race with the actual data on screen. Van Gisbergen braked significantly later entering that corner than he had on every previous lap. The result was his front end going directly into Hill's left rear. Hill's spun went backwards into the outside wall at full speed. The rear of his number 33 Chevrolet was destroyed on impact. Race over on lap 47. McMurray's words after seeing the data were as clear as they get. He said, "Now, obviously that's driving in deeper, and that's the first thing that we looked at after I saw the wreck. I have to give SVG a little bit of a shout out because he didn't say anything on the radio and he didn't say anything about being guilty. And that is the number 1 rule we tell everybody. As you look at that, it's almost undeniable. Obviously, he can deny it, but when you see how much deeper he drove in, all you've got to do is go back and look at 50 other laps. They're all lifting pretty close. There's some tire wear. You lift a little bit earlier, but lap to lap you just typically don't see that much difference. A former Cup Series driver and analyst just looked at the live telemetry data and said it was almost undeniable. That is about as close to a guilty verdict as you get without NASCAR officially handing one down. Richard Childress did not wait for any analysis. He said it over the radio the moment it happened. Somebody talked to Nascar about that. That was blatant. And then he named the reason. He said it was just payback for California, referring directly to the San Diego crash. A NASCAR Hall of Fame team owner on a live radio frequency that everyone in the garage can hear just accused the opposing driver of deliberate retaliation. That is not something that gets said lightly. Childress has been in this sport for over 50 years. He knows exactly what he is saying when he says it, and he said it loud and clear for everyone to hear. Hill's team radio after the crash told the whole story in 7 words. Childress says it was blatant. Hill responds, "Yep, just wait. Just wait." 2 words. That is not a driver who is thinking about the bigger picture. That is a driver who just told his entire team that this is not over. And his crew knew it. They got on the radio immediately and started trying to talk him down. Big picture, Austin. Big picture, please. Over and over. Because they could see what was coming. What came was this Hill got his car repaired enough to roll back out of the pit box, and instead of going back to racing, he drove directly to where Van Gisbergen's car was sitting under caution and hit him. Slammed into the left front of the number 97 Trackhouse Racing Toyota, while Van Gisbergen was driving away under a caution flag in front of every official, every camera, and every person in the Chicagoland Speedway grandstands. Van Gisbergen's reaction on the radio was perfectly understated. "The young fellow hit my left front." He did not even use Hill's name. He called him the fellow. From a man who had just called Hill a spud 2 weeks earlier, calling him the fellow on the radio is somehow even more dismissive. Hill then took his wrecked car to the garage for good. He finished 37th. Van Gisbergen continued on and finished 25th, a lap down. Neither of them had a good day. Both of them made sure the other one knew about it. When Van Gisbergen faced reporters on pit road after the race, he denied everything with the calmest possible demeanor. "I was shooting for the bottom trying to get clean air. I was so tight and he just chopped my nose and got in the wall. So sorry about that. Sorry to his guys. They're always nice people and it happens." And then he was asked whether he planned to reach out to Hill to smooth things over. His response was 4 words. "I'll talk to him, but he just grunts." Not angry, not defensive, just completely unbothered and faintly amused. That is the most dangerous kind of rival to have. The one who wrecks you denies it with a straight face and then makes a joke about how you communicate. Hill was not laughing. He told reporters directly that the two of them had not spoken a single word to each other since the San Diego crash, that they do not see eye to eye, and that from his perspective entering that corner at Chicagoland, everything was normal. Racing until Van Gisbergen sped up. From my standpoint, it just looks like he sped up. So, who knows? He also said on whether NASCAR should get involved, possibly if there's definitive evidence. I'll leave it in NASCAR's hands. NASCAR has not issued any penalty as of this morning. Whether the telemetry data McMurray laid out on the broadcast is enough to constitute definitive evidence in NASCAR's view is the question that will define the next chapter of this story. Because if NASCAR does nothing, if they look at the data, look at the history, look at Childress calling it blatant on team radio and still decide it was just a racing incident, then every driver in that garage just got the message that payback is acceptable as long as you brake a little later and deny it afterward. And if NASCAR does act, then Van Gisbergen faces a penalty in the middle of a playoff battle where he already sits just 36 points above the cut line with 7 races left. He cannot afford points deductions. He cannot afford to miss races. He is already walking a tightrope on ovals with 0 road courses left on the schedule. Adding a NASCAR penalty to that situation turns a tightrope walk into a high-wire act over a canyon. Dale Nard Jr. watched all of this from the broadcast booth and had the most honest reaction of anyone in the building. He said, "I'm here for the battle between Austin Hill and SVG. That's 2 big boys and I do not want this to end. I like the fire on the racetrack. I like the fireworks." Dale Jr. is right about one thing. This is not ending. 3 incidents in 4 races. A rivalry that goes back 2 years and 2 series. A team owner calling it blatant on live radio. Telemetry data that Jamie McMurray called almost undeniable. And 2 drivers who by their own admission have not spoken a single word to each other since San Diego. Atlanta is next Sunday. It is a super speedway, drafting, pack racing, nowhere to hide. And Austin Hill and Shane Van Gisbergen will both be there.